You don't belong here. That's the very first thing Karen screamed at me the moment I stepped out of my old pickup truck. I had just pulled up to my quiet little log cabin, tucked away in the mountains, ready for a weekend of peace. I came to escape city noise, breathe fresh air, and maybe do some fishing. But instead of tranquility, I was greeted by Karen, the self-appointed queen of the neighborhood HOA. Now, here's the funny part. Karen had no idea who I was. She just saw an old cabin, a beat-up truck, and a man in worn jeans carrying firewood. To her, I must have looked like some trespasser sneaking onto her property. She marched up with her arms crossed and nose in the air. "Excuse me, this is private property. Cabins here are for members only. And you," she jabbed her finger toward my chest, "clearly don't belong." I smiled calmly, unlocking my cabin door. "Actually, ma'am, I think I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." But Karen didn't like that answer. "Oh no." She huffed, whipped out her phone, and dialed 911 right in front of me. "This is Karen Walker," she announced loudly, making sure I could hear every word. "I need the police immediately. There's a suspicious man trespassing on HOA property. He's refusing to leave." I just leaned against my truck, shaking my head. The cabin wasn't just mine. She didn't know it yet, but the land beneath her feet, the winding roads, the sparkling creek, and every single cabin in this valley belonged to me. Let me back up for a second. My grandfather bought this valley back in the 1950s. At the time, it was nothing but forest and wild mountain land. He logged some, built a few cabins, and eventually passed it down to my father. My dad kept it quiet, leased some parts, sold a few lots here and there, but kept ownership of the entire valley. When he passed, all of it came to me. The HOA? Oh, that was just a group of cabin owners who formed a little club, pretending they ran things. They set rules about paint colors, trash bins, and even how tall your grass could be. But the truth? The HOA had no legal authority over me. None. They didn't own the roads. They didn't own the lake. They didn't even own their precious meeting hall. All of it was leased, on my family's land. So, while Karen thought she was the sheriff of this valley, she was really just a loud voice with a clipboard. And today, she picked the wrong target. 15 minutes later, 2 sheriff's deputies pulled up. I stayed calm on the porch, sipping coffee from my thermos while Karen flailed her arms, rushing to greet them. "Officers! Thank goodness you're here," she cried. "This man is a trespasser. He refuses to leave. He doesn't belong to our HOA." One of the deputies walked up to me. "Sir, can we see some ID? Maybe proof you're supposed to be here." Karen folded her arms smugly, already convinced she'd won. I handed the deputy my ID and then, just to make things interesting, pulled a thick leather folder from my truck. Inside were the original land deeds, maps, and tax records for the entire valley. I'd brought them along because I was planning to update some paperwork that weekend. "Here you go," I said calmly. "Not only do I belong here, but technically, so does everyone else. Because I own all of this land." The deputy frowned, flipping through the documents. His partner leaned in, reading the seals and signatures. Karen's smirk began to fade. What are you talking about? That's impossible. The HOA owns this valley." I chuckled. "No, Karen. The HOA rents it. Every cabin, every road, every dock on the lake. Your little club exists because my family allows it. These papers show my grandfather's purchase, my father's transfer, and my current ownership. If you don't believe me, you can check the county records." The deputies glanced at each other. One of them actually laughed under his breath. "Ma'am, looks like he's telling the truth." Karen's face turned red as a ripe tomato. This must be some kind of mistake. I'm calling the HOA board." "Please do," I said, sipping my coffee. "They'll confirm it." Within an hour, 4 HOA board members showed up in shiny SUVs. They marched up my driveway like soldiers ready for war. Karen stood proudly beside them, convinced reinforcements would back her up. "Sir," one of the board members said stiffly, We've received reports you're causing trouble. This cabin is HOA property. Is it? I asked casually. Then I laid out my folder again. Deeds, maps, leases, all signed and notarized. Because last time I checked, every cabin here, including yours, sits on my family's land. You've been paying lease fees for decades. Don't believe me? Look at the signature at the bottom of your own HOA charter. That's my father's. They froze. One by one, their expressions shifted from arrogant to pale. They knew I was right. Karen, however, refused to surrender. This doesn't mean anything. You can't just walk in here and do whatever you want. The HOA makes the rules. Not you. I leaned forward, locking eyes with her. Karen, the only reason the HOA exists is because my family allowed it. I could shut it down tomorrow if I wanted. Do you understand that? Silence. The board members suddenly looked very uncomfortable. Karen, though, still sputtered, searching for words. Now, I could have kicked them all out right then and there. I had every legal right to dissolve the HOA, reclaim the cabins, and bulldoze the whole thing if I wanted. But I didn't want war. I just wanted peace at my cabin. So I made them an offer. Here's the deal, I said. The HOA can continue. You can still have your little meetings, your bake sales, your newsletters. But things are going to change. From now on, you'll treat every resident, member or not, with respect. No more harassment, no more fake rules, and definitely no more calling the cops on people who belong here. Karen exploded. You can't just make demands like that. Oh, I can, I replied calmly. Because the next time you pull a stunt like this, I'll terminate your lease agreement and dissolve the HOA entirely. And then you'll have nothing. Do I make myself clear? The board members nodded quickly. One of them even muttered, "Yes, sir." Karen. She stormed off, fuming, her little empire crumbling around her. Word spread quickly. Within a week, every cabin owner in the valley knew the truth. Some were shocked. Some were relieved. And a few even thanked me for standing up to Karen, because apparently, she'd been making everyone's life miserable for years. The HOA board quietly restructured. They backed down from their strict rules and stopped pretending they owned the valley. And Karen? Well, she tried to rally people against me, but no one wanted to follow her anymore. Eventually, she stopped showing up at meetings. As for me, I got exactly what I came for: peace and quiet. I spent that weekend fishing at the lake, chopping wood for my fireplace, and watching the sunset over the valley my family had cherished for 3 generations. And every time I saw Karen drive past, glaring at me from her shiny SUV, I just smiled and waved. Because deep down, she finally understood the truth. So what's the takeaway here? It's simple. Never assume power you don't actually have. Karen thought she ran the valley because she had a clipboard, a title, and the loudest voice in the room. She strutted around as if being on the HOA board made her queen of the mountains. But here's the truth. Real authority doesn't come from bossing people around, handing out fines, or making threats. Real authority comes from ownership, from integrity, and from the respect you earn by treating people fairly. And that's where Karen failed. She thought intimidation would get her way. She thought calling the police would scare me off. She thought shouting the loudest would make her right. But all it really did was expose how little power she actually had. Because here's the thing, when your authority is fake, when it's built on bluster instead of substance, it crumbles the second someone shines a light on the truth. And that's exactly what happened. The moment I pulled out those deeds, her empire of rules, fines, and threats collapsed like a house of cards. Meanwhile, I didn't need to raise my voice. I didn't need to brag, threaten, or prove myself with arrogance. All I had to do was show the truth. The papers spoke louder than any insult, louder than any police call, louder than her entire HOA board combined. And isn't that the way life often works? The people who shout the most, the ones who puff out their chest and try to control everyone else, they're often the ones standing on the weakest ground. Because if you truly have power, if you truly know your worth, you don't need to scream about it. You just let the truth reveal itself.